Welcome to episode 13 of the Oh So Spurs podcast, where tonight we've got a full house with Stu. How are you, mate?
I'm all good. Evening, everyone. Good to see you all.
How you doing, Si?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. Deej, how are you, mate?
Doing good. Could be better, I guess. But that's mostly because of Tottenham.
Yeah. And Jonny, how are you, man?
I'm fantastic, thank you. Absolutely tip-top. Can't wait to get into this.
It's like the house is burning down and it's fine. It's fine. Everything's okay. Yeah. Where do we start with this month that we've had where everything seemed to be okay, and now we've lost Conte. Paratici might go to jail. He's at least facing a ban. We've got no wing-backs left. And we've got no idea who our next manager is going to be. But it's fine, because Daniel's got it under control, apparently. He's going to sort us out. But, where do we start? I guess we start with Paratici, right? Like, what are your thoughts on that at the moment, boys? Like, where does this leave us?
I would love to know who signed off on him, doing his little piece last night from his cell. I mean, what the hell?
Yeah.
I mean, they couldn't have, you couldn't have come up with worse timing than for him to, to be fair, everyone's been complaining that the club hasn't communicated, so finally someone's communicated. But did it have to be the guy who 24 hours later was going to get, sent down, basically? I mean, it's just insane. You can't make this shit up.
Yeah. It's drawing maximum attention, isn't it, to what he said last night by the timing. It's literally we've been talking about this before, about communication, and it's been months, hasn't it? It's been months and months. I mean, I think he's only done it twice that I can remember, since he's been in the job. He decides to do it the day before, and that was given the green light. Absolutely, it's insane. We really are. It's like, how can we make maximum fools of ourselves? Every avenue is explored and exploited.
Everything this season feels like Tottenham's a really slow-moving train, and there's like a tied-up baby on the track, and it's going to hit it, and there's loads of time to sort it out, but instead we're just like, no, let's just leave it on course. Something might change before it gets there. When it's just so easy to stop and change direction, it's just... It's been an unbelievable few months, and I don't want to make this into an ENIC bash or whatever, because we've got the bigger picture on that, and they've got us to where they've got us, and fair play to them. But the last few months have been a proper shit show.
I think it's even worse than that, Jim. I think what's happening is this slow-moving train is coming along, and we keep getting just in front of it and tying babies onto the track, and it'll run that one over, and then we'll go and tie another one onto the track because can't do that much. I'm two babies. And we just keep tying babies to the track and letting the track run over it and thinking, where are all these fucking babies going?
I reckon that Levy's taken a page out of Trump's book. Like, if you fuck up once, everybody makes a big fuss about it. You fuck up so many times, people just forget about it. It's the norm.
It's just... whether Paratici knew the outcome or not when he made his statement, he must have known there was a very high likelihood of that being an outcome. What was he doing? Just rolling the dice. Evens, I put the statement out. Odds, I hold it off until I find out the answer. I mean, they just got no logic to it from a business sense, is it?
Mm.
No, it's an absolute shit show, and we're going to do a bigger deep dive into them tomorrow, I guess, on the ENIC Focus podcast, and we're going to talk a lot about culture of the club and the issues there. But what a mess. But back to where this leaves us now in the manager search. Now that Paratici is really out of the picture, shouldn't we surely just kick him off the cliff now and say goodbye, thanks very much, you got us a couple of nice players in and you set up a bit of more of a recruitment structure, but let's move on while we've got 10 weeks left of the season. Get a new director of football in to find a manager, surely.
We should have thrown him off a cliff in November, in my opinion. But I guess I understand wanting to keep a consistent transfer philosophy through the January window, even though we really, I think my senile grandmother could have picked out Pedro Porro as a target, and she's never seen a football match in her life. So I don't know. I'll email her information to Levy. I think she'll be our new manager. Only one who will
What
take charge
what
of
can
this.
Paratici actually do? He's banned from everything that he does. He can't do it. So why is he even still there? Like,
No, exactly.
So
He should be
and
gone several
yeah, I
times.
think he's done enough in terms of on the legality side of it to let him go. He's done enough because he can't do his job now. He's put himself in a position where he cannot do his job. So I think from a legal point of view, there'll be no issues with
no.
the termination of the contract. I would guess, unless there's some way he can still operate in the background without having any contact with
He's not
other
allowed to be involved in negotiations anyway. That's definitely.
No, but is he still allowed to work in an organisation that is football based? If even though he's not allowed to operate into other organisations, I don't know.
I don't know, but surely you would think that in his contract he's got a clause of a good conduct clause in his contract. I mean, most of us in our normal day-to-day jobs have, so I would presume he must at his level.
Yeah, I mean, even if he doesn't, you've then got a case of you could dismiss with cause here because the dismissal will be related to the ability to do the job, and he's been charged with something and had a ban. That's like DJ being banned from doing software development and then going, well, I could still tell someone how to do software development. Yeah, but you can't. So it'd be the same sort of thing. You got every right to terminate that contract, I would guess.
Yeah, you're right. There's no point having a puppet in place because you can't replicate relationships with someone else, and you can't replicate your experience through someone else or your working style. It's just.
And if other clubs still know that he's there pulling the strings, there's going to be some.
Yeah.
It would just be too awkward, even if it was legally allowed.
Yeah,
I think that Sorry, John.
There you go.
I was going to say I think that this also is a big kind of time to Levy to show up because he's obviously known about this since November when it first came out. So he should hopefully have got a plan for what happens when it's confirmed that he can't do his job anymore. So hopefully he'd have already spoken to the lawyers, got everything ready, got a new DOF or MD lined up because I think everyone's on board with the fact that this has to be the structure. Levy shouldn't be running the football side of our business anymore.
Yeah, I want to think you're right there, Stu, and say this has obviously been going to happen, and there's a plan B obviously in place. But as seen with Conte's dismissal, there was clearly no, plan. They just assumed he was going to stay. They just assumed that the blindingly obvious wasn't going to happen, and I just can't help but feel that's going to be the case again with Paratici. So yeah, we've got to go back to a director of football structure though, surely, right? Regardless if he's gone. I know people are saying just get Poch in, he doesn't like a director of football, but I can't see that being a sensible move.
Not in this day and age. I don't think you get away with that. You just can't, because the director of football, you can't do it like Ferguson used to do it at Man United, where he had visibility of the youth team, the under-21s, the reserves, and everything else. It's too big now. There's too much focus on the first team. So, I mean, that director of football really is the director of football, right? So it's not the director of the football of the first team. It's the director of football. It's to make sure that the academy is working. It's to make sure that all the facilities are there. It's to make sure that the philosophy of the club is played throughout the entire organisation. It's not just what happens with that first team. That's why you have a first team manager.
Yeah, I agree. It's imperative. It's like there's no other option. You have to have a director of football these days, or we're just going to get left behind. We're long gone beyond the days of a manager just watching some video clips and his mate, who's a scout, following a few games and telling him who's great. And it always seems to lean to biases, I find, with that. I don't know if you've noticed, but it always seems to be that whatever nationality your manager is, Wolves basically turned into Portugal. Under Poch, I think Lo Celso, there might have been, and Foyth, there was a little bit of kind of bias to your own kind of allegiance and country and the way they play. That all goes on as well. It needs to be a completely independent structure from the manager. My view.
But if you put the right governance in place, then working as a director of football could be really productive, as long as the director of football is aligned with the manager. That's the key. So you have to have a footballing philosophy and where you want the organisation to go. You have to have a vision, a direction of travel, and then align the relevant parties in order to deliver that vision. And if you get the director of football and the manager aligned, then that's the sweet spot. And that, I hate to say it, that lot up the road have got exactly that at the moment with Edu and Arteta.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the key is, in theory, the DOF or MD hires the coach because they believe in the same philosophy. I think what the key stage we're at now is Levy needs to step up and appoint a DOF who is in line with the promises he made post, Moo about bringing in a manager who was going to give us the attacking style of football that is part of our DNA, etc. Hiring Paratici never made any sense with that. So we need to bring in someone who's going to live and breathe the philosophy and culture of Spurs. And that's why I would like, I'm not saying Hoddle should be back in, but I would like some of our older players to be more involved as not the DOF role, but in the club around living and breathing and passing on that culture. Because then, when you change a DOF, you still have some key parts of our club history there to kind of help the new person come in and align them with where we want to be.
And Sai, I think this is a good segue into. I want to ask you this because just for some context, Sai's got a master's in cultural change, and he's we won't reveal each other's jobs, but he's a big cheese in this area for a large multinational organisation. Yeah, Sai. So you were discussing this earlier, weren't we? Like, what do you make about the cultural issues inside Spurs that go beyond, the things that we were saying maybe should be Daniel Levy's remit, but it's clearly not a strength of his to push through the club?
I think what you've got at the moment, you've got a big clash going on about what the belief of the culture of Spurs should be, was against the way that the behaviours are manifesting themselves in the club at the moment that are not aligned with that culture. And that when you get that, you get a lot of tension, a lot of friction, and you get a lot of people that have been there from the old culture not really buying into the way that the behaviours are being exhibited in the new culture. So, and when you talk about culture, you've got sort of to simplify, and it is an oversimplification. You've sort of got three main areas that make up culture. You've got your behaviors, your symbols, and your systems, right? So if you work backwards on that, the systems are, how do you set yourself up to be successful? So what does your organizational structure look like? Where does the power within that structure look like? Who makes the decisions, and who drives all of that throughout the organization? So that's a key part, is your systems and your setup. How do your rewards work around that? How do you incentivize people in order to behave in the way that you want them to behave? And how do you disincentivize the poor behavior? Not necessarily penalize it, because that becomes very punitive, but you need to disincentivize the behavior that you don't want to see. So you've got the systems, and that's how you set up to do things. You've then got what are really, really powerful are the symbols. So when you think about the symbols of Tottenham, you go back, the symbols of Tottenham are free flowing, fast attacking football. You look at the stories that are in the club. You look at the Blanchflowers. You look at the Bill Nicks, the Keith Birkinshaws, the Hoddles, the Waddles. All of that, they're all symbolic of a club that has history of being in a certain way. And you can't just shift that from a culture, because that's what you build your club on, right? And those symbols are really important because it tells you the DNA of the club. And even moving forwards, and one thing that I do want to give Levy credit for about the new stadium is, you look at some of the symbols in that stadium. You look at the floor, where it's basically the granite floor is part of the old stadium that was ground up and put into that. The centre circle, all of that, the golden cockerel still being maintained on the top. All of that are symbolic of what the club is and what makes us feel the way we do about the club. So all that's really important. And then you come to the absolute crux of it, is the behaviours. How do we do things around here? How do we want to behave? And does our behaviour reflect the culture that we want? And at the moment, it doesn't. And that's the point. We say we want one thing, we say we're this, but we behave in a different way. And that then leads to distrust. It leads to people saying, well, what's the point in doing what we're doing if we're not going to behave in that way? And the behaviors are the key. There's a saying in business that that culture eats strategy for breakfast, which means you can have the best strategy in the world, but if your culture is toxic, your strategy is useless because you can't achieve it without the right culture around it. And that's where we're at the moment. Is you have an organisation that doesn't know what it's here for. And if you don't know what you're there for, therefore you don't know where you're going. And if you don't know where you're going, you don't know how to behave in order to get there. So that's the key here. We don't have a vision. We don't have a purpose. What's the purpose? So I was saying to Jim earlier on, we're having a catch up for tomorrow's pod earlier on today. And I was feeling pretty shit yesterday. I spent most of the afternoon in bed just because I'm lazy, but not that I was ill. But I watched, there's a 3-part documentary about Real Madrid on Apple Plus. I finished watching that. I know exactly what the purpose of that club is. I know exactly what everyone's driving for. I know the fact that their motto is never give up. I know that just from watching 3 hours worth of documentary. And I would guess that every fan, every person involved with Real Madrid will tell you that that's the DNA of their club.
Yeah.
Never give up.
That's why it doesn't matter where their squad is in terms of like the Liga or whatever it is, they turn up in the big competition in the Champions League season after season. It's
absolutely. And they talk about, we talk about, where do we buy players from, youth team, and the president was there saying, we have experienced players, we have youth, we buy players in. We do all three of those things well, because you have to do all three of those things. It's a little bit like Barcelona have an incredible youth system, right? But they don't get everyone from the youth system. They buy well, and they buy. Funny enough, they buy from beneath them and make those players better. We want to buy from above us and drag them down. We can buy below us and make players better. That's really the way that coaching works.
And ironically about Barcelona is they took it from Ajax, because it's Johan Cruyff who brought the Ajax culture to Barcelona.
Yeah. So that's my 2 pence on the culture. And the thing about culture is you have to define what you want it to be, or it just becomes something. Because you can't say we don't want a culture, because culture just exists because it's what you do, how you behave. So you have to define what you want your culture to be, and then put the systems in place in order to achieve it.
Yeah. Well,
could I just ask you, do you think that's, partly, giving Conte an alibi, but do you think that despite the huge turnover of players that we've had, the culture is what he's referring to, about the players getting lazy, not appreciating the pressure, and that there is some kind of aspect in the club that kind of gives the players an excuse not to show up when it matters?
It could be. I mean, it's really difficult to say unless you're in it to sort of see what's going on. So that could be a possibility. The other possibility is that because there's a lack of direction, there's a lack of vision, and there's a lack of purpose, everybody has their own idea of what the vision, direction, and purpose is. And they play or behave or do their jobs according to their version of what it is. You need to be explicit about what it is. And, some of the visioning stuff could be stuff that you think you're never going to achieve, to be, I don't know, to regularly win Premier League and Champions League. That's a massive vision for 10 years. But at least you can get behind that and say, right, what do we need to do in order to get there? But you have to then develop that underneath to drive the culture towards that. Because if 5 of us on here had the idea, let's win the Champions League in 10 years' time, and then we just said, right, go ahead and do it, we'd all do it in different ways. We'd all have different views. The tactics and the strategy that we put in place would be different. And that's where, when people say, oh, bloody Conte, when Conte says it's not my fault, it's all your fault, mate. Because either you're not, you could really push Levy and the board for the direction, the vision, and the purpose. And if you're not doing that, what you're getting 15 million quid for. And if not, then it's on you to set that and say to the team, this is what it is. Not let 23 players in a squad go out and decide how they're going to play the game and do what they want to do without any direction.
Yeah,
I think though when you're talking that you're outlining the different aspects of what forms a culture and where that can be disrupted. I mean, from my point of view, and I'd say most fans' point of view, we obviously had a period of significant stability and growth and progress with Pochettino, and then when that didn't work, for various reasons, then Levy decided to go in a completely different direction. And it doesn't marry with what the club's history and identity is. And then he went down the same road again with Conte. So, like, I don't think that it's. I would think most Spurs fans would say that if what is your culture, what is your symbols. You're talking also, like, we've got 2 dares to do, right? So, like, that's all over the stadium. It's in all of the promo videos and everything else. I mean, that tallies with what you were saying about the fast, free-flowing, attacking football, the sort of swashbuckling stuff, the Ginolas and the huddles and all of that, and that is what us as fans want to see when we go to White Hart Lane. And it isn't really a particularly difficult question to establish what is our identity, what are we here for, what do we want. It's just a matter of, like you said, in terms of having the systems that are in place and making sure that there's a consistency between that and the vision, and that the behaviours follow through. And I suppose it's like you kind of look at Klopp, and I said this the other day, that how he kind of makes a connection with the locals and becomes, although he's from, like, wherever he is in Germany, he's from, he's like an honorary Scouse now, and, like, there's an effort on his part to really understand the history of the club, to make that connection to, he's sort of, you're cutting open like a stick of rock and it says, something like the Cop or 97 Hillsborough or something when you open up down the middle of them. It's like, we shouldn't have a difficulty with that. And we do have a really proud history. I know there's a long period where we've not been lifting trophies, but Spurs is a big club, and we've said this before, the reach that we still have, talking to various other guys in the pod before, like, it's still a club that is world renowned. I think when we were doing the Milan, we were talking to the Milan supporter before the second leg, and he was talking about the esteem in which and regard in which Spurs is held in Italy, which is obviously an absolute bastion of football and a passion for football, and so it's. I don't know enough about how the recruitment side of things work, but like what Stu was saying before, clearly the director of football should be the person who's recruiting the new coach. I don't know enough about who's out there in terms of directors of football, who we can pinch from wherever. Like, what can we? Is it appropriate to sort of look down and develop sort of like the Brighton thing and look at what they're doing so well? Bring in the best of whatever systems are being used in other clubs. But we surely, like, with the resources we have, like, you're wasting all this money on compensation for managers every 18 months. Try and avoid that altogether and take your time. Now we've got 10 games. I know we want to try and get things in place before the summer, but there is an opportunity now. Like, it's not difficult. It's not difficult. We all wrote down what is Spurs about. What does it represent? What do we expect? And anybody who loves football, should think, geez, yeah, that's something I can get behind, because it's fun to play. It's fun to watch. It's something that's ambitious, and it's a bit idealistic. But you got to, what's the point in being in a competition if you're not wanting to succeed? And what is success? Like, yeah, you're saying a 10-year plan. Like, we're now not happy if we don't make the top 4. Like, I remember 10 years ago or whatever, and kind of like the excitement of when you're near the top of the league, like when Bale was coming through and stuff like that. Like, you're near the top of the league in December, it's like, oh my god, like, you got vertigo because Spurs is up at the, when they've got the little match of the day and they only show the top few teams. Like, oh my god, Tottenham are actually in the slot there, and then we're getting the Champions League. Then we're getting through the group stages, and we're getting to the final eventually. I mean, there's been a hell of a lot of progress, and I don't think, especially looking at the Arsenal situation this year, it shouldn't have to be 10 years even before we could possibly be in that situation. It's just got to be.
I agree. I think that what you've got to do is the footballing philosophy, I think, is easy to define for us. You're absolutely right. Every fan in the ground should be able to tell you what our philosophy should be. Then you've got to say the so what on top of that, and then everybody that's in any way, shape or form involved in the footballing side of things at Tottenham then has to become obsessed with the purpose. And I'm not sure they're obsessed with the. Well, first of all, I don't think they've defined a purpose that everybody could articulate. And then there's not an obsession to it that you say every single thing. If I do this, will it move me towards the purpose? If not, we don't do it.
Exactly. They don't have the end in mind because there is no idea of what that end is. Like Real Madrid's, like you said, it's simple. We are going to win the Liga and we're going to win the Champions League every year. I don't care how stupid that sounds, and we're always going to be the
And they see it as a
Galacticos.
failure if they don't, by the way.
Exactly. And if they're out for it for 5 minutes, it's how do we get back there in 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Like, it's not acceptable to be anywhere else. Whereas I think of us a bit more like, well, if we do the right things and we keep being sensible, we might continue to move forwards. And then suddenly we kind of go, oh, we overachieved that year. That's great. Can we? And like I said, we're not an big anti-ENIC Get Out Our Club podcast. We are very grateful for where they've taken us to, but it's clear that they're not currently the group of people who are going to be able to take us from, let's say, fourth to first, and that's what you crave as a football fan.
It's quite, at the same time, Jim. I think like it's that kind of like challenge of being realistic and also like not accepting like less than your best and it continually improving. And I think that's kind of like where I think maybe some of the time we've not been successful, where we are culpable, that there is like a bit of a tolerance of mediocrity, and certainly under the Conte system, I think, and Mourinho, like there was a long periods where we didn't, like, the players just didn't seem to have the motivation or sufficient. Like, I hate it whenever a team loses. I know most professionals and most clubs are the same, but you know when your team loses a game, especially if it's like a derby, and then you got the bloody international teammates like high-fiving and like grinning away in the centre circle. Like, are you serious? Like, that is an absolute piss take. And you know, we just have to, when we had Pochettino, and I actually don't really want Pochettino to come back, although I'd be happy if he did. Like, it's like those years, like you didn't really give up. Like there was always like, we did have late comebacks. I know we got some late goals under Conte as well, but like, it was like from the beginning we were on it and we didn't give up. I think, okay, the last year was a bit different, but that there's all sorts of reasons behind that with the recruitment stuff. But in terms of, what do we accept? We were not going to go with a new director of football, a new coach, and being Real Madrid and say, no, we're not winning the league, because that's what we're all kind of giving out about people who are not realistic, and people are saying, oh, well, you know, we're not as successful as Liverpool or United or Chelsea. And like, okay, so how do you think that's going to work then? I mean, it has to be a plan. Like, you're not going to just say some words and everything magically changes. But like, there does have to be I totally agree. There does have to be a buy-in terms of the culture. That the players who come in from overseas should know from the beginning, like what the objective is and what's acceptable, and to try and do like what I was saying Klopp's done. So, you know, like, you kind of feel with Romero, like, and he'd do that for any club. But like, when he's your guy, like when he's getting stuck in, you know, it's just like, because you know he gives a damn. And that's, I think, the thing that frustrates me. And the just sort of acceptance when we're not putting in performances. Really, that it winds me up.
There's one thing that I'll never forget, and I'll never forgive our players for, is the time under Nuno when we were the bottom ranked side for the amount of kilometers run per game, and the first game under Conte we were top. And that just shows you that there's something rotten with our squad.
Yeah, I remember that. That's so true. I'd forgotten about that. That was the incredible statistics that turned it around. We literally went from one extreme too far on one side to the other extreme where everyone's hamstrings are picking off as they walk out the door to get their shopping in the morning. It's just crazy. But
I think just a quick one on, just to pick up on what Jonny said there about, you know, using the players within the squad that have the influence. There's in culture theory, there's a word for those guys. They're cultural architects. And what you do is you use your cultural architects to influence the other members of your teams, whether it's a sports team, whether it's a business team, it doesn't really matter. But you will know in your businesses who the cultural architects are. They're the ones that people go, oh yeah, oh Jim said that, and oh Jim, you all know who dickheads are as well, because they think they're the cultural architects, but no one follows them, no one listens to them. But you've got people like, I mean, Kane's a cultural architect. Clearly, Romero is a cultural architect. Even Dyer in the changing room, he might not be one of your best players, but he's definitely a cultural architect. You have to use these guys to bring your message along and to drive your ways of working. And you need to get rid of the ones that are cultural terrorists.
But Si, wouldn't you say that, I agree with you that Dyer clearly has an influence, but are we sure the influence he's having is the right one? I mean, we've got our leaders are Lloris, Son, Dyer, Kane, and I personally, from the outside, obviously, what do we know if looking from the outside? But they don't look like when the chips are down. I don't trust any of those guys to step up and get everybody behind and in the right direction.
This is where that they may not. So I wouldn't say that Son's a cultural architect. He may be a leader on the pitch, but that doesn't necessarily mean he has the influence around the squad on the training pitch. I think Dyer has some respect amongst the players. Whether he's a leader on the pitch as we would want him to be, they're sort of two slightly different things. You could even have cultural architects. Fraser Forster could be a cultural architect from the sidelines. It's about what happens on a day to day, not just what happens on the pitch. But you're right. That should translate itself onto the pitch as well. But they don't have to be what you would consider your senior leaders on the pitch. But they influence people in other ways, in the dressing room, on the training pitch, in the social events, all of that sort of stuff.
We've heard them before, players that are just extremely popular in the dressing room and keep the rest of the squad harmonious when they're there, but they don't actually even play. Like, it sounds like Richarlison's even one of those where everyone wants him to do well, everyone respects him, even though when he's playing badly, he just seems to draw people in.
It's like the great Milan side. There's a lot of stories about the likes of, Maldini having more influence than the coach on inside the changing room and being the first one to, any new player that comes in that starts thinking he's too big for his boots, getting pulled to the side by Maldini and say, we don't do that over here. The likes of Gattuso, Pirlo, and when all that lot retired, that's when Milan all of a sudden started struggling.
I think we need
Tottenham just needs to get.
After you do,
I was going to say,
you finish
Tottenham needs to just get players who are cultural architects and good players, because we've had cultural architects, we've had people who are like good in terms of like creating a culture, like Golini, Aurier, both of those I think are two of in the past that come to mind. But all of our cultural architects kind of seem to be shit on the pitch. So if we can get both of those, I think that'd be crazy.
Football is kind of a bit simpler than we make out sometimes. And as PSG show, if you've got 11 of the best players in the world, you're still going to compete and get into the late stage of the Champions League, whether they are meant for each other or not. Fine, they're not making that last hurdle because they don't have the right mix of personalities, but you're still going to get pretty far if you've got a squad loaded up with very good footballers, simple as that is. But I wanted to kind of move on a little bit towards the next part of the pod, which would be focusing maybe a bit on Everton and our injury crisis, along with how that's probably going to impact if we line it. So there's actually three parts to this. How are we going to line up under Cellini? Is it going to be Conte 2.0 with a bit more willingness to perform in that way? But B, is he going to be forced to change because of our injury crisis, particularly with no Davies, no Perisic, no Royal?
Emerson.
Yeah, these are pretty light. And then
no Bentancur.
No Benton. Yeah, it's Lloris is back, but surely forced to start. Do we start with the goalkeeper? Does surely forced to just hold his place?
I'd keep Forster, to be honest. I don't think Lloris has done anything to keep his place and walk straight back into the side.
Yeah,
I would agree, but I think Lloris goes back in.
Mm-hmm.
I think we had this discussion a couple of pods ago about where we thought this would land. I think Forster's done everything to keep his place. I wouldn't see any reason not to. But I think Lloris walks back in. And that there is part of the problem, because there's this right. You five are always playing. We've seen it with Son this year. He should have been dropped ages ago, right?
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So
I think Jeez, I keep talking over you. I think I don't know. Maybe Stellini isn't as much of a hierarchy guy as Conte is. We'll see. I have my doubts, but I don't know. I think Forster's okay. I wouldn't be mad if Lloris starts personally. Just thinking back to the closed doors friendly we played a couple days ago against Ipswich, where we were up 2-0 when Lloris was in. We subbed Lloris out for Forster, and I think it was Forster. Lost 3-2. So, it wasn't? Okay.
He was on international duty.
Oh, yeah. I don't know why I was thinking that. Okay. But, I mean, I guess that shows that that Lloris is at least getting back in. I don't think he starts yet. I think he's probably still getting back up to fitness. But, I don't know. I'm still not completely convinced by Forster. The Sheffield goal was so bad. I know that's bad, and I know that Lloris has howlers too, but two keepers with mistake prone, I don't really see a difference in between them.
Well, I see one can play with the ball with his feet and the other can't.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know.
I also think, Fraser Forster's, there's not much of a bar to compare yourself with, but I think Hugo under pressure isn't great. And even his stature, okay, we're not going to write off Hugo after 10 years of service, but I have a lot more confidence in Forster than I would in Lloris, especially when he's been out. He's not played for quite a couple of months now. You know, I don't think you put him back in the minute he might be available. And is he 100% fit? Because I thought it was going to be. I suppose it is going to be the end of the month, isn't it? It's the 1st of April, appropriately.
And I would suggest that. Sorry, Jim.
There you go.
I would suggest that we're playing Everton, and if they go revert to Dyche style of football, physical balls in, perhaps Lloris is not the one to come back for that.
Yeah, you want a big lump of meat with big hands. In there for that game. To be honest, it summarises the goalkeeper situation when we're having to have this discussion. That's how much we need a new goalkeeper. I think that realistically, we've probably got 2 mid-table goalkeepers now, and we're in 4th spot somehow because the output of our strikers is ridiculous. But defence-wise, now this is going to be a more difficult one. Can he even play a back five? Where do we go from this situation?
It's isn't it? Because if you play back 4 with Porro at right back, that's a bit
risky.
I don't know what you do in this situation. I don't know.
But what do you do?
Do we go Son wing back again? Come full circle.
But can you imagine Tanganga or Sanchez coming in?
No. Could you have Tanganga at right back? But then what'd you do with Porro? Couldn't play left back though, could he?
I guess you could play left wing back, have Tanganga as a defensive right wing back. I don't know.
You could play a right footer at left wing back. That could work.
Yeah, I mean, let him cut in and shoot anyway. I don't know. He's got a foot on him.
Yeah.
Can't really have any worse left wing backs in my opinion.
But if you go to a 4, I'm not sure Longley could play left back.
No. Is Sass back?
I think so. He's back. He says he's supposed to come back in a week, but knowing us, that means he's out for the season. But I think this is a short-term issue, which means maybe they may be more inclined to make a short-term formation change instead of just trying to retrofit. I don't know. I don't know if that makes it more or less likely that a change will be made.
Don't we have that? What is it? Estonian right back, Patsotsky or whatever he's called?
We do, but I'm making all this based off the assumption that Stellini operates under the Conte philosophy of I would rather die than play people under the age of 23.
Yeah.
I think that's all of us out then. Well, maybe not you, Deej. Maybe you could get a place in the side.
Yeah. So, what's the votes then on the back 4 or 5? You thinking?
I think it's Dyer, Longley, Romero playing the 3 in the middle, and then Porro right, Perisic left.
Perisic
Probably.
Perisic is injured.
Oh shit! Okay,
So I guess,
I
there was Tanganga on the right and Porro on the left.
I saw Twitter that Danjuma used to play as a wing back.
All right.
well, this
left
will be
wing back.
interesting as well. Like, Salini's not going to give a crap about club signings and all this bigger picture stuff. Is he just going to say, actually, no, there's a couple of good footballers that deserve a place in the team? Danjuma is one of them, so play him. He's got nothing
Depends
to lose.
what Conte says. Conte will be on the phone with him, won't he? At
Yeah.
half time.
Well, the thing is, Stellini will have a bonus of some sort associated to finishing fourth. He doesn't give a shit how he gets there and the long-term impact on our squad. Surely he's just going to put the best 11 out there every week now. He doesn't care if Son's unhappy beyond his time.
Well, if you think about it, this is his probably one and only time he's going to get a shot at being a manager on his own.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, I wonder if, as well, whether Mason will be a bit more influential now without Conte there. Because I think Mason is definitely a cultural architect. I think the players really they respected him as a player. They respect him as a coach. I think maybe he will carry a bit more influence. And like there was lots of stuff on Twitter. Not that I put everything that I see on Twitter into any sort of high held respect, but his missus is having a baby, and I wonder if he would have got the position if she wasn't due to drop, But I think I don't think he changes much. I think he goes with a back five, fudges that left wing back, and then goes from there. And when we get players back fit again, so I think you either see Danjuma or even try Son back there again.
God, it's sounding bleak when you say that.
Well, the only thing is that how are Everton going to play against us? Are they going to be quick down the wings against us, or are they going to be going more route one?
I can't. I have a feeling that if we play anything besides classic Conte ball, it's gonna just. I don't think that necessarily defensive wingbacks will be all that important. It's Dyche ball at the end of the day. He came in mid-season. He doesn't even if he wanted to play more expansively, like he's claimed he wants to, and in interviews before at Burnley, I don't think he really had the time. And at this point, if you're in a relegation scrap, this is a game where you're looking at it and you're saying, if we get 1 point, that's a win, because every point matters right now, especially with how unbelievably close the relegation fight is this week. So this season. So I can't see them playing super expansively. I kind of see them just playing our favorite style of football, low block and counter. But because of that, I don't really think that having wingbacks who are not necessarily the most defensively sound is that big of an issue. And honestly, even if Paratici was still here, I don't think he's meaningfully better defensively than any of the other options we could go with right now.
Sorry.
No, I keep talking over you, Jim. Here, go.
I see, but do you guys even give a shit if this just goes south now this season? Like, I'm personally at a point now, I just want to see us go out and play, just do something a bit different. Like, I'm fine with us just not having, an ideal left back, and just rather than taking the safe option, just taking a bit of a risk, putting someone else there and just seeing what happens this season. My expectations have gone from expecting fourth, start of the season from expecting a title challenge completely unrealistically to just expecting nothing at this point and being pleasantly surprised if we pull something out the bag. That's to the point where I probably don't even care what team he puts out anymore.
Yeah, I feel that way. That's why I was about to say that. I'd like him to put Danjuma as left wing back and Paul as right wing back. And we've said all season that our defense is our weakness. So let's play on the front foot. Let's just attack and go for it. And we'll try the old Aussie Ardiles. We'll score one more than you and see how we end up. Or at least we'll be entertained.
Oh, by the way, I just saw a really funny tweet. Sorry to take it off. It's from Ramon Vega, our ex-player. We were linked with Zidane, and he said, "You do know he doesn't speak any English." apparently with yeah.
Because that's the reason he wouldn't join us.
Yeah, because that's the reason.
Ah, shit! If only.
I think he'd do a job in the midfield, if I'm being honest.
He'd get stuck in, wouldn't he?
There's a really nice video circulating around. You might be able to find it. Look up Modric's Zidane assist. It's in training. Zidane pings the ball across to Modric in training, and he just volleys it from about 40 yards into the top corner. It's beautiful. Slightly off topic, but there you go. Talking of midfielders, then we're thinking Skip and Højbjerg again, or is anyone hopeful that maybe we'll see some young? He's not going to give a shit about betting players, is it? Young players.
Why would he?
Yeah.
He's got 10 games left, 1 a week. He's going to keep those 2 as long as they're fit.
I do think. I mean, I would like to see Sarr and Skip given a run. I mean, I thought the game against Milan, they played well together.
Yeah. What's the situation with Basuma at the moment? Because he wasn't. I thought he was 6 weeks ish.
Saw something earlier that that's looking like he's out for the season in the least surprising bit of Tottenham medical news ever.
There you go. Breaking.
What? He's out for the season?
It said that he is unlikely to be able... They're fearful that he will be unable to play again this season. Let me find it. It's feared that Basuma may struggle to play again this season, is what Dan KP said.
Okay, so that's gone.
Yep.
Luckily, that's the only position we seem to be offloaded in, somehow overloaded in. I imagine if everyone was fit, I don't know where we'd start with that. So, yeah, it's the position I'm least worried about. At least Skip's getting games. I'd like to see Sarr get a few more. We're only playing once a week. I'm sure we'll be fine. Do you think, is Richie back? Because
he's going to be back after the Everton game is what current journalism is saying, which I take as maybe he'll be back for the start of next season. Who knows? Some muscle injury that he pulled up with at the start of the Southampton game.
Just before we go talk about the attackers, I wouldn't mind Devine getting 20 minutes, 15-minute run out in midfield towards the end of games, because he's got, looks like a bit of creativity on him. And, if we're not going to care too much about where we finish and start blooding these youngsters to see if they've got something, could be an opportunity.
Yeah, but I think that at this point, especially if Conte's on the decline health-wise, I think Stellini will, if they can somehow manage fourth, I think he puts that in bold print at the top of his CV and sends it across Europe. So I can't really see him doing anything but putting out basically hit what he thinks is our strongest 11 and playing them as long as they can. And like I said, he's a student of Conte. People under 23 do not exist unless they absolutely have to.
And where's his incentive to tinker? He's not going to be here next season. He's got no incentive to develop anybody. There's got to be some big pot of gold there for fourth.
Oh, definitely there'll be a financial incentive.
Huge incentive.
Yeah,
I'm sure the players have got that as well in their contracts as a bonus.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
So let's hope they can find a way to let money motivate them, even though, as we discussed earlier, it's not the biggest motivator, but it does motivate you under certain circumstances. So let's see.
Bonuses are a little bit different to basic pay. Bonuses can motivate when you see the bonus being achievable. So if you're sitting there and you say, right, 10 games till fourth, what bonuses do very well is if I do this, I get that. Bonuses work very well. So if they win 10 games, I get a bonus. Then then you can get obsessed by it.
And it's an achievable goal, so you'd think they'd be up for it. But
exactly.
I guess then the attack, but just finish that off, sets itself. Kulusevski's son and Kane, isn't it? That's just
absolutely.
Yeah,
and Decky's had a good break. I think he had a good international break. I think I read some reports on him in the last game that he was man of the match.
Yeah, he's been good in both games. He had a goal, or not a goal, but the closest thing you can get to a goal without it being a goal, I think, in his first game. And I think I'm hopeful that we see a better Kulusevski, because I think that based on everything he's said in the past week, he did not like Conte at all. So I'm hoping that we can attribute that as the reason why he has had a significant drop in form since he's been reintegrated into the team. Yeah. So much so that that Conte had played made the choice to play Richarlison the week after Richarlison slagged him off publicly. But hopefully that is good. Hopefully with a new system, we don't play Son as a deep lying 8. I think there's hope for the rest of this campaign being better. I don't really care as long as we play well. For as much as I want to say I don't care about the season, I do think it's important to kind of have a momentum going into the next season, because I don't want to have an entire off season of negativity.
Yeah.
Additionally, I don't think that there's much stock in this, but a lot of reports are saying, X manager will only come if we finish 4th. I don't think that's true. I think that most managers are more forward-thinking than that. But if that is true, it would be nice to have...
But on the managerial hunt, do you think... My personal view is going after Nagelsmann and Pochettino is just a complete time waste at the moment, because Pochettino sounds like his heart is set on being candidate for that Real Madrid job. So we're not going to get him before season starts, and he's a high risk one to wait for at the end of the season as well. Then we've got Nagelsmann, who's saying, well, he's kind of watching PSG and Real Madrid and saying, if I don't get those jobs, then I'll look at Tottenham. So then we end up going to De Zerbi, third choice. Do you want to leave Brighton, even though they might have finished above us, hypothetically, or very close with us, and he's got 4 years of deal, and we go, no, can't get you. Then that's our main shortlist exhausted. Then you start going to the plan Bs and the Cs, and you're going, I know the press have made it obvious you're our 4th and 5th choice. So the fans are already upright. We've already got a stick in for you already, and don't think you're going to be able to pull this off. But please come over here. I just think we should just be going, let's just go. I'd rather go for the plan B manager than not the Nagelsmann, and either go for Pochettino now, but we can't wait for Nagelsmann, is what I'm saying. It's like way too high risk. We either go for Poch now and get rejected, than go for an Ange or De Zerbi now. I just find this waiting around just crazy at the moment.
Do you not think, though, that we're having those conversations anyway through agents and intermediaries with the likes of De Zerbi and the rest of them, sounding them out to understand if they'd be interested or not? So that no one feels like they were 5th choice, 6th choice, the whole saga with the Nuno summer.
I have a feeling that we are, ironically, based on going against basically everything that we have ever done, I am hoping that we are acting like a big club and just not letting too much get out, except for journalists saying, who are the biggest 5 managers in Europe that could move jobs? And saying, that's Tottenham's shortlist. I'm hoping that we are just having conversations in private with these people and figuring out what their interest level is. That being said, I think that manager is a secondary concern to director of football, which we very clearly need a new one. Apparently, Tottenham's going to release a statement either today or tomorrow. Hopefully, that statement is we are throwing Paratici off of the skywalk and letting him walk back to Italy. But I think that we need one of two things. We either need to sign a director of football in the next week, or we need to sign... I think we need to sign one of two, either a director of football or a new manager within the next week. If we can get a manager in the next week, which we won't, because Tottenham will wait until the day before next season starts and bring back Nuno, because he'll make us proud. But if we can get in a manager next week, I would assume it would be one of the two, like Nagelsmann, Pochettino. That seems to be Nagelsmann, Pochettino, or I guess come to an agreement to pay De Zerbi's release clause when the summer comes. One of those three options. If we can get one of those three managers... I personally
think it's a little unfair. Sorry, Teach. I think it's a little unfair saying that we take... At the only time we made a mess was the Nuno one. If you think all the other managers... Okay, and the AVB, but they had Sherwood in mind. But the other ones, we've had a manager pretty much ready. We've got rid of Nuno and Conte was on board. We got rid of Poch the next day. Mourinho was on board. And I know for a fact because someone spotted him, but Levy and Mourinho met during the international break here in Dubai. So it had already been planned out ahead of time. So, yes, we screwed up the whole Nuno summer, but I don't think we do have a track record for screwing up manager appointees.
Yeah,
we
true.
might not have always appointed the right one, but that's another discussion.
In terms of having, and someone said this in the WhatsApp group, the wider Spurs, wider one, and it was a really good point. Since Paratici's come in, recruitment has improved as much as our managerial appointments have become shambles. Like, he's done a good job at building a structure and sorting out the recruitment process, but he was behind that whole Nuno, Fonseca, Gattuso fiasco. And if you believe what you read, Levy was the one who actually appointed Conte. Now that ended in a failure, so that is on Daniel Levy. But at the time, that was seen as like
the world-beating. We couldn't
exactly.
believe that we got him.
We were looking at Fonseca under and Gattuso under Paratici. So I wonder now if he's going. I don't want Levy involved with transfers, but I just hope that this can speed up our selection, because like you say, Stu, he's often got the wrong managers in, but he has been quite decisive over who he wants, gone and got them historically, if we're being fair to him, and he's been completely ruthless when he fires them. And that, again, the dithering over Conte strikes me as that's new behaviour, which was weird, and that's a new behaviour since Paratici's come in. So the managerial side is probably been slightly worse.
You know that dithering was to do with the legal complications of the contract, because it's mutual agreement that they've left. So they've signed a termination between the two of them, and they can call it mutual. That's because they've been some give and take on the certain contractual elements of the compensation, without a doubt. That's what took the time. That's why they couldn't announce.
Yeah, I think it's a bit unfair to say that we dithered around with Conte, because if Conte hadn't basically, if Conte hadn't basically said I'm leaving without saying I'm leaving, I think that we could have taken the week and no one would have known, kind of like what Bayern did with Nagelsmann. They had decided that they wanted Nagelsmann to leave a week earlier, but because Nagelsmann had publicly expressed discontent, they acted like a big club and acted quickly. A lot of things take a lot of time behind the scenes, and big clubs are good at not leaking them. And I think that the fact that no concrete links to a next manager have come is actually probably a good thing. The only thing that worries me is the whole Paratici issue, in terms of we have to cut him off, but that kind of means that we're going to have to bring in a whole new director of football who will have his idea for who our next manager will be. So I don't know. I don't know what the best way to do it is. I don't know if it's better to hire a manager first if you can ensure a manager. Or
just thinking back to the previous times when we've changed manager, and when it's been during the season, though, that I can't remember a time when we've changed manager at the back end of the season. And I would presume it makes sense that it would be much more complicated when there's so many things kind of up in the air when you're talking about potential replacements and the variables that exist for, like the De Zerbi situation, for example. Obviously, the Real Madrid, there's only one job and there's more than one person interested. But it's going back to the thing with where you rank in the order. I mean, it's the director of football. Again, how easy it is to prize away somebody who's of the level and the identity that matches what we're looking for at this stage. Yeah, I know money talks and all of that, but whereas I know nothing about the personnel that is out there in terms of European football or whatever that would do what we would hope they would do. But is it not an awful lot more complicated because it's practically April and there's so many things that people are not going to want to walk away from at this stage.
True. And do we want a type of manager that's going to walk away from their club 2/3 away through the season? Is that type of person we want running our club? I know we're like this as fans, aren't we? A player we really want, we go after them at an inadvertently smaller club, and we're like, why aren't they handing in a transfer request? I want them to throw their toys out the pram and force the move. Then when our player does it, we're like, oh, what a prick. Being marched around the golf course with Gary Neville and wanting to go, what an arsehole Harry Kane, and we all you know what I mean? We're just so blinkered and blinded with these things sometimes.
But now that his missus is up the duff, we've got another kid to consider for the kidnap, haven't we? We could take the newborn. That's a really big one.
Another baby to throw in front of the train.
Come on. Tie it to the tracks, boys.
Athletes number 9. But I think we need to wrap up there, boys. We're on the hour. But it was lovely catching up, getting some of that off our chests. And I think I'm just so excited for football to be back. I just want to be focused on talking about what happens on the pitch rather than all this bullshit, because life was happier and we didn't have a clue what was going on behind the scenes. Yeah. And if you read people like Matt Law on Twitter, you're just always going to be miserable because they just make shit up to appease a certain group of people that click and get riled up by their information. There you go. Anyway, boys, lovely catching up. And I'll end the pod there. But up the Spurs. Roll on.
Go on, you Spurs.
Go on, you Spurs.
Boys.